A joke on the set of The Andy Griffith Show in 1963 went very badly wrong. They broke into Andy Griffith's hotel room and found him in bed with a co-star. CBS execs got scared. Sponsors said they would stop spending millions on ads. Some people met in secret to decide what would happen with the show. The most popular small-town sheriff in the United States was a cheating husband. What happened next almost put an end to The Andy Griffith Show. Herb Leonard had worked in the field for a long time. He knew good people when he saw them. In the 1950s, he went to see Andy Griffith on Broadway in No Time for Sergeants. Everything changed at that time. Griffith played a sweet but naive country boy who was forced to join the army. His humor seemed natural, and his charm drew people in. Leonard saw something very interesting. He saw a lot more than just a great actor. He thought of the right lead for a TV show. The Andy Griffith Show came from that idea. Leonard said it was one of the most important choices he had ever made in his work. He was right. Griffith made viewers care about Sheriff Andy Taylor in a way that few other characters ever had when the show ran. Because he was kind, funny, and wise, he made Mayberry feel like home. But CBS had to see proof that Griffith could carry a show before they gave the show the go-ahead. On February 15, 1960, an episode of The Danny Thomas Show called Danny Meets Andy Griffith showed Sheriff Andy Taylor for the first time. In this episode, Danny Williams, played by Danny Thomas, is pulled over in Mayberry for going too fast. Andy Taylor isn't just a police officer. He is also the mayor of the town and the editor of the newspaper. People saw some of Mayberry in the episode, but some things were changed. Andy's figure was more inflated and leaned towards small-town stereotypes. Frances Bavier, who would later play Aunt Bee, played a different role as Henrietta Perkins. It wasn't just a test of wit. Leonard did the right thing for business. With the secret pilot, CBS could see how interested people were in the idea without having to spend extra money on a whole new show. They were very happy with how people responded. CBS and their main sponsor, General Foods, both agreed. The light is green. At the start of the 1960s, business sponsors had a big effect on TV. The people at General Foods not only liked the show, they loved it. They decided right away to support the Andy Griffith Show after seeing the pilot. Making that choice made things easy. CBS now had the money and faith to move forward. The Andy Griffith Show first aired on October 3, 1960. The setting was one of the smartest things Leonard and Griffith did. Mayberry was more than just a little town. It was always there. The show was set in the 1960s, but it felt like it was from the 1930s or 1940s. The civil rights movement or the Cold War were not talked about. That was done on purpose. Leonard and Griffith liked the idea of Mayberry as a place to get away. Andy Griffith didn't feel completely at ease with his part when the Andy Griffith Show first aired in 1960. He was tired of being cast as the same stupid pumpkin because he had just played Will Stockdale, a clumsy but likable country boy in No Time for Sergeants. At first, he used a lot of over-the-top Southern charm to play Sheriff Andy Taylor. He had big smiles, an overly excited look on his face, and a funny energy that made him seem more like a character in a play than a real person. Griffith quickly understood, though, that this method wouldn't work in the long run. By the second season, he had changed how he played the part. For laughs, he played the calm, steady middle of Mayberry. The backup cast did the funny parts while he played the straight man. This change wasn't just about the acting, it also affected the whole format of the show. In most sitcoms of the time, the main figure caused trouble. Lucy's pranks were what made I Love Lucy a story. That changed, though, with the Andy Griffith Show. The funny parts came from a supporting cast, especially Don Knotts as Barney Fife. Andy Taylor, on the other hand, played the smart and patient problem solver. The fact that Don Knotts played Barney Fife was one of the biggest surprises as the show grew. Deputy for life. But when Knotts read for a one-episode part, it was clear that he and Griffith would get along. Producer Sheldon Leonard gave him a one-year deal right away. That choice changed everything about the show. Frances Bavier as Aunt Bee was another choice that came with its own problems. Andy Griffith didn't want her for the part at first. The call was made by Sheldon Leonard. Even though Bavier was an experienced actress, Griffith's laid-back nature didn't get along with her serious professional attitude. While that was going on, the search for Opie Taylor brought a different kind of difficulty. There were over 500 kids who tried out for the part, but 6-year-old Ron Howard stood out. He wowed producer Sheldon Leonard when he saw him on an episode of General Electric Theater. Howard was already booked for another show at the time, But when that pilot didn't get picked up, he joined Andy Griffith Show. At first, Opie was meant to be naughty and full of energy, like a lot of TV kids of the time. But Ron Howard's father suggested a different approach. He told Ron to make Opie seem polite and honest, which set him apart from other kid actors on TV. It was a good choice. One of the most touching parts of the show was Opie's relationship with his father, which added warmth to the comedy. Howard spent 8 years on the show, from 1960 to 1968, and grew up on set. When it was over, he was already thinking about becoming a movie director. When he was 15, he started playing around with Super 8 cameras, which set the stage for a job as a director that would eventually win him an Oscar. Howard still says that his time on The Andy Griffith Show was one of the most important things that helped him become an actress and a storyteller. The Andy Griffith Show was a huge hit from the very first episode on October 3rd, 1960. In its very first season, it ranked as the 4th most popular show in the world and the #1 comedy in the United States. At that time, TV was dominated by big shows like Gunsmoke and The Ed Sullivan Show. That kind of success was very rare. However, there was something unique about The Andy Griffith Show. It wasn't just funny, it felt real. It took people to a nice, familiar small town that they would want to visit every week. From October 1960 to May 1961, the first season had 32 shows. An average of 27.8 million people watched each week to see the show's fictional town of Mayberry in North Carolina. That made me feel at home. Around it all was Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith. He was a calm and wise man who used common sense and patience to keep things in order. His deputy, Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts, was funny because he was always making mistakes and was too excited. They got along great with each other. Barney was wild and full of energy, while Andy was steady and thoughtful. The show went well because of that balance. The Andy Griffith Show stood out because it had both funny and sad parts. Only jokes. It was about people. Sheriff Taylor was more than just a cop. He raised his son Opie, who was played by Ron Howard, by himself. His Aunt Bee, Frances Bavier, who played her, took care of him and his brother. There were funny and touching parts in every show, and learning about being good, having friends, and being a family. Andy and Barney had a hard time staying away from Aunt Bee's awful homemade pickles in one of the most famous episodes, The Pickle Story. It was funny, and it also showed how nice they were. They didn't want to upset her, even though the pickles were awful. Smart scheduling by CBS was a big part of the show's instant success. It ran every Monday at 9:45 p.m. Eastern, right after one of the network's biggest hits, The Danny Thomas Show. Pick at random. Andy Griffith played Sheriff Taylor for the first time on The Danny Thomas Show, which is where The Andy Griffith Show got its start. CBS put the new show right after The Danny Thomas Show because they knew people already knew the character. This kept people watching. There were a lot of hits because the plan worked. The fact that the show was able to last was the real sign of its success. It always stayed in the top 10 for 8 years. It was very rare for someone to be so consistent. A lot of people still watch the show after season 5. It did something that almost no other show had ever done by the time it finished on April 1st, 1968. It was the most watched show in America at the end of its last season. Some shows like Seinfeld and I Love Lucy have been able to do that. But there was a lot of drama behind the scenes on The Andy Griffith Show. In real life, Frances Bavier was not at all like Aunt Bee. She played the loving and warm mother of Mayberry on The Andy Griffith Show, but she was cold and hard to work with behind the scenes. The person she fought with the most was Andy Griffith. He liked a laid-back set full of jokes and pranks, but Bavier was very serious about acting and didn't have time for nonsense. They were clearly tense with each other. The cast and company knew about it. She also felt forgotten. Most of the laughs came from Don Knotts as Barney Fife, but she thought her character didn't get as many chances to be funny. In appearances, she said she felt left out. I've had to sit back and watch other people laugh, as the saying goes. She felt so bad about being angry that she went to therapy to deal with it. It wasn't just tense between her and Griffith. At times, it was downright mean. Griffith was said to be angry that director Sheldon Leonard chose Bavier instead of him. Even Jim Nabors, who played Gomer Pyle, had to tell Griffith to be nice to Bavier and call her a great actor. But the strain never went away. To get around her, like avoiding a landmine. She might get angry over small things. Even though they fought for years, Bavier and Griffith finally got along. In 1989, when she had cancer, She called him to say she was sorry. She told him, "I'm sorry we didn't get along better," and took the blame for how bad their relationship was. I was to blame. They had one of the last talks they ever had. Don Knotts quit the show after the 1965 season, which caused another big change. But it wasn't just because he wanted to focus on his movie business. It was a disagreement about money that caused everything to change. Knotts signed a 5-year deal for the show when it began in 1960, getting around $1,250 per show. That came to about $35,000 a year. It was a good wage, but not even close to what Griffith made. Griffith had a big share in the show, which meant he was making a lot more money. Knotts had nothing to lose. In 1965, when his deal was almost up, he thought the show would be over. So, he made a deal with Universal Studios to make 5 movies. Then, though, CBS picked up the Andy Griffith Show for more seasons. Knotts had to make a hard choice all of a sudden. Griffith told him that he could renegotiate his contract in order to get a better deal or a cash stake in the show. Griffith got the request wrong. He thought it was an order. To avoid a fight, he let Knotts go. Knotts and Griffith stayed close even after they left. He came back as a guest star, but the show was never the same after that. The show Mayberry lost some of its charm without Barney Fife. A lot of his fans thought the humor wasn't as good after he left, getting rid of Barney to be a disaster. Jack Burns played a new deputy named Warren Ferguson in season 6 of the show. Burns looked like a good fit on paper. He had done humor before and had worked with George Carlin. Warren Ferguson did not work, though. Warren seemed too eager and awkward, while Barney was awkward but likable. He didn't fit in with the cuteness of Mayberry. People who saw him didn't connect with him. The producers knew they were wrong after only 11 shows. Was quietly written off the show without giving a reason. They never tried to get Barney back. Instead, comedic roles were taken by guest stars like Floyd the Barber and Gomer Pyle. One thing was clear after Warren failed, though. Nobody else was like Don Knotts. Barney Fife could not be replaced. Even less time was spent on the show with Eleanor Donahue. Ellie Walker, the smart and independent pharmacist who was meant to be Andy Taylor's love interest, was played by her. She agreed to work there for 3 years, but she was fired after only 12 shows. The main trouble was that Donahue and Griffith didn't get along. Their relationship felt forced. Andy reached for Ellie's hand in one scene, and Donahue responded in a strange way. It wasn't in the plan. In real life, it was hard to avoid the pain. Behind the scenes, Donahue was also having a hard time. She was having a hard time with personal issues and felt alone among the group. She even had lines that were given to other characters. She asked to be let out of her contract because she didn't like her part. The makers didn't say anything. Griffith was upset about her leaving, but she later said that the writers hadn't given Ellie Walker enough to do. It was possible for her to be great, but without good writing and connection, she was just another what could have been on TV. There was more between Andy Griffith and Annetta Corsaw than just their work on The Andy Griffith Show. Corsaw joined the show in 1963 as Opie's teacher, Helen Crump. Her character was only meant to be in one episode, but it was clear that she and Griffith got along. Her relationship with him on TV became an important part of the show very quickly. Outside of the movie, things were even more complex. He was married to Barbara Bray Edwards, who was his first wife. Daniel Viz book Andy and Dawn. The Making of a Friendship and a classic American TV show says Griffith was very interested in her. He asked her to marry him at least once, and maybe more than once, even though she was already married. But Corso said no. Her desire was to avoid a relationship based on cheating. The cast and crew found out about their affair. Even though they tried to hide their relationship, it was clear that they were connected. At a Hollywood hotel, one of the most famous parts of their reported affair took place. As a joke, the group working on the Andy Griffith Show sent a worker dressed as a waiter to bring the couple dinner in their room. That was just a joke, but what happened next made it a big deal. The team member is said to have seen Griffith and Corsaw in a sexual act when he came in. The joke backfired and showed their connection to everyone who wasn't aware of it already. Griffith was very angry. The event made things behind the scenes even more tense. For Corsaw, this might have been a big moment. If he could cheat on his wife with her, what would stop him from cheating on her too? She had already turned down his offers, but this may have made her choice even stronger. Even though it was embarrassing, they kept working together and never said anything about what had happened. The show's popularity based on how good-natured it was thought to be. That could have been hurt by any hint of scandal. So people worked hard to keep Griffith's private life out of the public eye. Griffith took care of things himself. It is said that he cut some love scenes between Andy Taylor and Helen Crump so that their real-life relationship wouldn't get too much attention. Less kissing on screen meant fewer questions. The actors and team also didn't say a word. There was no public talk about the hotel joke, even after reports spread. The media wasn't as intrusive in the 1960s as it is now. There were no newspapers that had to report on every scandal. No social networks to talk about bad things. It was easier for stars like Griffith to keep secrets. From 1960 to 1968, The Andy Griffith Show aired, getting the feel of small-town life in a way that was warm and comfortable. At first glance, Mayberry looked like a simple town where everyone got along and issues were solved with a smile. But the show always found a way to send deeper meanings. It dealt with issues of class, duty, and personal ideals without ever getting too heavy. Even though it didn't talk about big topics like the Vietnam War or civil rights, it still found ways to make people think. The honor of working-class life was one of its main ideas. People will remember the 1963 episode, Man in a Hurry, for this reason. It's impossible for Malcolm Tucker to leave Mayberry because his car breaks down. He is used to living in a world where things happen quickly. Time is valuable and waits are not accepted. No one in Mayberry seems to be in a hurry, though. Sunday is a day off for stores. No one cares about meeting goals, so everyone takes their time. In the beginning, he's angry. People don't move faster, even though he tells them to. Something changes by the end of the show, so he can see what he's been missing. It dawns on him as he rocks back and forth in a chair on Andy's front porch that slowing down isn't always a bad thing. It was easy to understand the message. Mayberry offered an option in a world that often puts speed and work ahead of connecting with other people. However, Mayberry wasn't perfect, no matter how cute it was. The town didn't have any black people living there, which seemed more and more strange as the 1960s went on. Andy Griffith later said he felt bad about what he did. It tried to show what life was like in a small town, but it left out a big part of truth. Still, the show was mostly about feeling like you fit. People who were different from everyone else, like Barney Fife and Gomer Pyle, were welcomed in Mayberry. There were more than just picture-perfect families in the town. It was about giving people a place that cared about them. Some shows stood out because they dealt with real problems in a fresh way. One of them was Opie and the Bully, which aired in 1961. At the time, Opie is being picked on. School. Someone always takes Opie's milk money, but he doesn't fight it. And he doesn't tell him to hit the mean kid, but he also doesn't tell him to stay away from that person either. People remember the lesson he teaches Opie. I don't want him to be the type of boy who looks for fights, but I also don't want him to back out of one when he's right. At last, Opie stands up to the mean kid. He gets hit, but he also regains his pride. The episode was just right. It wasn't a defense of fighting, and it wasn't an argument for going away either. It was a simple story with a lot of meaning. Another show for 1961 that stuck with me was Opie's Hobo Friend. David Brown was played by Buddy Ebsen. He is a drifter whose carefree manner makes Opie fall in love with him. David does not have a job and does not follow the rules. He also tells Opie that leaving school is not a big deal. Andy steps in and tries to show David a better way to live. He doesn't make David leave, though. David is not meant to live that kind of life, so he fakes his own arrest to teach Opie a lesson. Nothing in the episode was clear-cut. It didn't make David look like a bad guy, but it also didn't make his way of life seem like something to respect either. So people really liked it. Others thought it glorified being homeless. It made people think either way. The show dealt with social problems in a way that wasn't too direct. Mayberry Goes Bankrupt, which aired in 1962, was about a man who was wronged by the government. Strangers. These shows never had anything to do with real life, but they did touch on something deeper. They made people think about what it means to be fair, kind, and how people in a community should treat each other. That's why they're still good today. Fans of The Andy Griffith Show were sad when it stopped in 1968. They wanted more. CBS also didn't want to say goodbye, so they made a show called Mayberry RFD. It wasn't a reboot or a whole new story. It was an extension with a new lead, Sam Jones, played by Ken Berry. Sam had lost his wife and was taking care of his young son, Mike. To make the change seem normal, both characters were first seen in the last season of The Andy Griffith Show. On September 23, 1968, the first episode of Mayberry RFD aired. It got off to a great start. The wedding of Andy Taylor and Helen Crump was shown, which was something fans had been waiting for. That night, more people than ever watched the first episode of the show, which set a record. The first season of the show was the fourth most watched in the country. Andy Griffith made a few appearances at the start to help with the changeover. The town felt the same thanks to people who lived there before, like Aunt Bee, Goober Pyle, and Howard Sprague. But something wasn't right. Mayberry's charm was still there, but the show lacked the fun and depth that made the Andy Griffith Show so great. There were not as many complicated plots and battles in the stories. People loved it anyway. It stayed in the top 10 of the Nielsen ratings for 3 years. You could say goodbye to Andy in the first episode, which was also the start of the new show. At the start of the story, his friends have a bachelor party at an Italian restaurant. Aunt Bee makes a big choice while her husband gets ready for his vacation. She wants to leave Mayberry and live with her sister in West Virginia because she thinks Andy doesn't need her anymore. Later, she changes her mind and moves in with Sam Jones to be his housekeeper. This is the start of her new part in the show. There's a lot of humor and sadness at the wedding itself. Barney Fife, who is Andy's best man. His nervousness makes the moment more interesting and funny at the same time. Aunt Bee stays in town after the wedding because she talks to Reverend Tucker about her plans for the future. That was a great way to end the story and begin the next one. Mayberry RFD didn't last, even though it was very popular. It wasn't because people stopped being interested. The show was canceled by CBS in 1971 as part of their rural purge. The network wanted younger people from cities because advertisers liked those kinds of viewers more. So, even though they got a lot of viewers, Mayberry RFD, Green Acres, and the Beverly Hillbillies were all dropped. Someone in charge at CBS even joked that they got rid of anything that had a tree in it. Fans were shocked. People had always liked the show, but now it was over. It looked like that was the end of Mayberry for a long time. Finally, in 1986, CBS showed a made-for-TV movie called Return to Mayberry. It had most of the original group back. With a 33.0 Nielsen rating, it was the most popular TV movie of the year when it came out on April 13th. After 20 years, the story picks up. Opie is about to become a dad when Andy Taylor comes back to Mayberry. At the same time, Barney Fife finally gets to run for sheriff. Barney's long-awaited wedding to Thelma Lou is one of the most important parts of the movie. Not everyone came back. Aunt Bee was missing, which was clear. The movie says she died because the actor didn't want to play the part again because of her health. Fans got the finish they had been waiting for even without her. Some people may not have liked Mayberry RFD as much as they liked the Andy Griffith Show, but it did give fans more time in a town they loved. And when Return to Mayberry came out in 1986, it made everyone remember why they had never really left. Mount Airy, North Carolina, looks like a scene from the Andy Griffith Show every September since 1990. Over 40,000 people visit Mayberry Days every year, which is held in the town where Andy Griffith grew up. People dress up as Barney Fife, Aunt Bee, and other well-known figures for a few days. The roads are lined with old police cars that look just like the ones in the show. The town of Mayberry comes to life with music, parades, and other events. The Mayberry Days Parade is one of the most popular things to do, while dressed up as well-known figures. Original props and memorabilia from the show, including things given by Don Knotts, can be seen at the Andy Griffith Museum. Fans can watch old shows on the big screen at the historic Earl Theater, just like they did in the 1960s. Live bluegrass bands play at the Blackman Amphitheater. The best thing about Mayberry Days is that the whole town takes part. Souvenir shops sell things with Mayberry themes and meals that were inspired by the show. Actors walk the streets and talk to tourists as if they were just coming out of an episode. For fans, it's more than just an event. It's a chance to get into the mind of Will Marsh. The Andy Griffith Show did more than just make people like it. A lot of awards were given to it. The show won 6 Primetime Emmy Awards from 1960 to 1968. Don Knotts won 5 of them for his part as Barney Fife. This made him one of the most honored comedic actors in TV history. Francine Bavier got an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress in 1967 for her role as Aunt Bee. To my surprise, the show never won an Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series, even though it was nominated several times. Only got stronger after it was over. In the early 2000s, it won awards on TV Land. Andy Taylor won Single Dad of the Year, and Barney Fife won Favorite Second Banana. It was added to the TV Hall of Fame by the Online Film and Television Association twice, first in 2006 and then again in 2021. Critics have also said that the show had an effect that will last. In 2002, TV Guide placed it ninth on its list of the best TV shows ever. Some episodes, like Opie the Birdman, are still praised as some of the best in TV history.